All right. I know. It's been a long time. I realize that it's been like a month since we've had an episode. Just calm down just a little bit. It's okay. We didn't forget about you. It's just coronavirus. And unfortunately, we've come to that point. I've been holding out for as long as I can, but it's inevitable. We're going to have to make a coronavirus episode.
I thought it'd be gone by now.
And I mean, I did take a week off. It was spring break, so I took a week off for that. And the other 3 weeks, I've just been quarantined inside my house. And
Inexcusable.
Yeah, it really is. And I hadn't made an episode. We hadn't made episodes. Just because of all of this. And I do apologize for that. I was waiting for as long as I could to not make a coronavirus episode. And
You caved in to the pressure of the media.
It's inevitable because it's what's going on right now. And I didn't want to... And I was like, well, what else could I talk about? Because I don't want to just gloss it over. But I know that that's all anyone is talking about right now. And, I know personally I don't want to just sit all the time and just watch coverage about it or people talking about it. I do want a little bit of something different because the world is still turning. Like the sun is still coming up and it is still setting. So things are still going on in the world. So I didn't want to just focus on coronavirus. But... it seems that we've come to that point because the only other interesting thing is stuff with the Democratic primary. And God knows I don't want to talk about Joe Biden again.
You talk about Bernie Sanders.
Well, I want to talk about people who actually have a chance of impacting politics.
I think that Tulsi Gabbard, is she still even in the race?
No, she dropped out.
Oh.
To my knowledge. I'm pretty sure she dropped out 2 weeks ago.
She was a contender.
Yeah, she was. All 1% of her. And I say that. But out of all of them, if you had a gun to your head, a water pistol, I guess, because this is the liberals we to be talking about. So if you had a water pistol to your head and you had to choose a Democrat to be president, mine would probably be Tulsi Gabbard. She is the least insane out of all of them. I believe that we said this before, but if you had a water pistol to your head, and Joe Scarborough was there telling you to pick the next president, it would probably have been Tulsi Gabbard.
Jay Inslee for me. He understood the working man, the man that slung hash. He understood those men.
Oh my God. I mean, there's so much, and the thing is that it changes every day. There's really no good way to talk about coronavirus except in a very broad sense, unless you're a daily program. And I guess I'll start with this. We're coming just off the heels of the $2.2 trillion stimulus package being signed by Donald Trump. He signed the stimulus package. It was passed by the Senate and the House. You had a little kerfuffle there with it being passed by the House because of the GOP representative. What's his name? Thomas Massey?
I believe so.
Yeah, Massey, I think. I couldn't remember how to pronounce his last name. It's Thomas, I believe, Massey. Pardon my ignorance. But to where he had everyone come back to Washington to pass the stimulus. And everyone was just... I mean, he had every possible sniper trained on him at once, all the way from Donald Trump to the likes, on the left, for just all across the aisle, all across the political spectrum. People were lasered in on him, and the fact that he made them all come back. And he was inciting constitutional provisions and stuff to where they had to be present there in the chamber to vote to ratify this. And this ties into something that I also kind of wanted to talk about. And I mentioned it a little bit on Twitter. We haven't been as active on Twitter lately either. Just because I know if you're like me, everything that I could possibly share is probably going to be coronavirus related, because that is all the news feed is. And it is rightly a huge deal. It is rightly a huge story. But I just haven't wanted to inundate everyone with that, because I know that you're already getting that kind of stuff. You know, if I'm going to put stuff out, I want it to be something that is new, it's engaging, it's something that offers a different perspective than what's already out there.
I mean, this story has
something
just
thought-provoking.
Controlled the news media
for a
weeks.
while. Yeah, for a while. And this ties back to a larger point that I wanted to talk about in terms of fiscal conservatism and this stimulus. And I believe that was actually one of Representative Massey's complaints, about this. And one of the things that he was inciting was talking about fiscal responsibility and the stimulus and such. And he obviously, as I mentioned before, talked about constitutional provisions or their bylaws, the House bylaws, all that kind of stuff about them having to be present to vote on this, blah 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 blah. And that's all well and good. And this is gonna sound like I'm like trying to make excuses or get around this in some way. I'm not. But what we're dealing with right now is a very, very unique situation. And the severity of that, is where people might disagree. I mean, the World Health Organization declared coronavirus a pandemic weeks ago. And even though, there is a lot of comparison of numbers between outbreaks that we've had in the past, illnesses, and the number of people that they've killed and infected, we're doing that comparison. Most recently, and I guess most notably, the swine flu from the Obama administration. The comparison of those numbers, and how there were some 60 million people infected, and you had, I don't know how many thousands of people who had died. I think it was like 12,000.
It was about 12,000.
Yeah, like 12,000 people who died. There's a lot of comparison, between that and our response, and people going all the way back to the flu epidemic in 1918 or whatever it was.
Spanish flu.
Yeah, the Spanish flu, and how many people worldwide were infected, like 500 million,
something like that.
And there was some like 10% of that I think was fatal. There was like 50 million deaths or some crap like that worldwide.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of comparison with that. So you can differ on how severe that you think coronavirus actually is, whether you think the media is playing it up, or whether you think it is actually something that, if not handled correctly and not given the response that we have given it, could metastasize into something much greater. You can have that debate, you can have that discussion. It's not really what I'm talking about here. It's that this is an extraordinary circumstance. And the thing about this stuff is, the thing about the coronavirus, the stimulus, our response, everything like that, is that these are extraordinary circumstances. And it's often in extraordinary circumstances that you see people talk about an abuse of power, like FDR. Abraham Lincoln is brought up, with some of the things that he did in terms of states' rights, all that kind of stuff. These, like it or not, these are extraordinary circumstances and extenuating, and they it's promoted a response all around the world, regardless of the number of people infected and those who have died. It's promoted a response that has radically changed us economically and in terms of the way people are governing. And normally I would applaud Massey, at least, for his adherence and his strong-willed belief in these provisions and following the rules and the procedures and doing everything by the book like you should. Normally I would applaud that. Thing is here is that we're in extenuating circumstances. And sometimes you have to hold your nose and do things that you wouldn't normally do. Now, here is the one thing that I would say, is that in regards to fiscal responsibility, and believe me, seeing a $2.2 trillion I'm making sure that something's still on. Believe me, seeing stuff about a $2.2 million stimulus, or $1 trillion, sorry, $1 trillion stimulus, is something as a conservative that does, put a little pit in your stomach.
Makes your eyes go a bit crossed when you see all those zeros.
Whenever you see all the zeros and think of how much money that is compared to our national debt and the amount that we normally spend in our normal budgets, that kind of stuff. Because I believe that we had done an episode before talking about the budget that they were doing and how, it was coming out to be $4 trillion. This is half of that just for this, And this is why fiscal responsibility is so important. And this is why it's something that I have, talked about and very adamant on for a while. Because if we were fiscally responsible before, it allows us to assume this kind of debt now. It allows us, if we're fiscally responsible before and we're paying our debt, we have balanced budgets, all that kind of stuff. Not only does it create more security economically, and it creates more of a, of a stable foundation, but it allows you in the future to, this is kind of like a family's emergency fund. And what you'll hear, if you've ever taken like a personal finance type class, or anything like that, there is always going to be debts that you're going to have to take on. And a lot of times, in terms of your economic life financially is taking on debt and paying that debt off. And in our instance, if we were fiscally responsible before, we would be able to take this debt on because we've already paid off our debts before, and we have the ability to take this on and it not be devastating. Ultimately, though, I know on the other side of this that nothing is going to change in terms of the way that the government and our congressmen look at fiscal responsibility. There isn't going to be some sort of massive revolution, and I say this with the hope that I am wrong. This is one of the few times to where I really, really, really hope that I'm wrong, and that they become more conscious of where their money's going, how it's being spent, and balancing their budgets, etc., to start eliminating the national debt, which now is already like 26 trillion. I don't even know.
I was going to say what Trump should do is, if he's reelected in November, and hopefully the Senate is kept, they gain a majority, and I hope that they get the House back, hopefully with enough of a majority that they can almost just blow the Democrats off with anything that they want.
Yeah.
I hope that they bear down on fiscal responsibility, really focus on that during those next 4 years and those next 4 budgets, or 2, depending on what would happen in the midterms of 22, and eliminate some of that debt. Even if you take it down to the $18 trillion that Obama had when Trump got in there, if Trump eliminates all of his debt that he's amassed during his term, that's a monumental achievement that no other president has done since, Coolidge, maybe? Maybe even Wilson back in World War I, before World War I, Harding?
Yeah, you'd probably go back, to Harding and Coolidge, which their fiscal responsibility and the stuff that they did to the to the budget of the federal government is really, really interesting if you go back and look at it. The way that they literally, over the course of 2 years, I think, they cut the federal budget by like 75%, I thought. Because they cut it in half from one fiscal year to the next, and then from that fiscal year to the next, they cut it in half again. So over the course of 2 years, they reduced federal spending by like 75%. But if you look at their economic performance, joblessness dropped, prosperity, and income among families. I mean, everything that you look at as your favorable economic ratings went up, and everything that was unfavorable went down. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but that's basically what happened whenever they were cutting the size of the federal budget. But I understand Massey and the reason why he wants to adhere to those rules, that he wants to remain principled in this way. The thing is, this is an extenuating circumstance, and it would have been totally fine to allow them to vote on this remotely. This is extenuating. This is a very contagious virus, so let them vote remotely.
Especially since members of the chamber have already proven that they've gotten this.
It was not the time to try to make this principled stand. It was just not the right time to draw the line in the sand. It was very, very poorly calculated. I don't know. It was just a very poor decision on his part to make that his line in the sand. I understand why. And I understand his argument of fiscal responsibility. My argument is, and I don't know what other people are saying. I haven't really listened to what other conservatives are saying on this. I've only heard a little bit just in terms of, this needs to be done because of this, because it is an extenuating circumstance. And I go a little bit further than that to say the thing is that our fiscal responsibility that we should have been enacting before allows us to take this on. Yep. And it not be irresponsible.
Because now it's crippling. Now it hurts you.
Now it hurts because you floated everything down the river for so long. And, this was one of the big things about the Tea Party movement. In fact, that was one of
the founding
That was one of the
principles.
Principles of the Tea Party was the stimulus from Obama. That whenever we look back on it,
it's child's play compared to what's happening right now.
Yeah, because it was the almost $800 billion stimulus, approximately. I know it wasn't that high, but it's just rounding up. Your $800 billion Obama stimulus, and that's child's play now. We were freaking out about that back then, and it caused a schism in the Republican Party. It caused a revolutionary movement across the nation for conservatism. And that was $800 billion. And now here we are at $2.2 trillion. We sold ourselves down the river for all these years. And, we've talked about fiscal responsibility. You have to balance your budget. You have to pay your debts. You have to do these things. You cannot have the unmitigated spending that you're having right now. Whenever, is it 60%, I think, of our budget goes toward just welfare and social programs. Social Security itself, I believe, is a whole 25% of our budget. And then you have Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, and your other food stamps, your other welfare programs. It adds up to like 60%, I believe, if I remember correctly, of our federal budget. It's insanity.
And it's
insanity.
It is never going to end until you essentially get enough politicians in there basically willing to commit political suicide to end those programs.
To find a way to end those programs in such a way that it does not cause prolonged suffering or modify them.
I've always said that maybe what should happen
Modify
is
them in some way.
those that are already qualified under the program, that are already maybe paid into it,
Yes.
they live out the rest of their lives through that program.
And that was the thing
but
a couple
we
of
stop
years ago.
getting people into them.
Yeah. And that was the thing a couple of years ago that Ted Cruz was talking about whenever it came to Social Security, that he was being attacked for, was, grandfather. If you paid, if you're paying into that system and all that kind of stuff, at a certain age, you're still going to have your Social Security, but we need to figure out a way for everyone else to get them out of the federal government.
Oh, you capitalist
out of
pig.
that.
You want to kill Grandpa.
Yeah, I do. No, he literally said that we would grandfather them in. No pun intended, that we would grandfather them in. And they would still get their benefits, but to move Social Security off the government bankroll, to move it off of there. So I understand Massey. I understand his whole thing, and this is a really different conversation than I thought I was going to have, but it's still a good one to have about fiscal responsibility in this time, because it is important. And the thing is I understand this, and I even support this stimulus because it is extenuating circumstances. The thing is we should have been responsible before, and it would have allowed us to do this now, and you would have a very clean conscience about it.
We're going to be having this conversation again within another month, because they're looking that they're going to have to pass another stimulus bill.
Yeah.
And if this keeps on going, another one into the summer months.
But that seems to be all the time that we have for today. So, again, we're sorry. We know it's been a while. We know it's been just a tidbit since we've been with you. But we thank you for joining us today. You can make sure to follow us on Twitter at capital TCNW. We're at the CWire, capital TCNW. And for Logan, I, and JD saying goodbye, God bless, and we will see you next time.